Today, in Great Stories in Bioethics, my personal YouTube channel, I'm going to tell you about 10 great books to read that touch on bioethics issues. 8 of them are by physicians, 7 of them are memoirs, one's a semi-memoir. They're all books I've used a lot in teaching and the students like a lot. So here we go. First is one of my favorites by Abraham Verghese called My Own Country, A Doctor's Story. My Own Country is published in 1994. It's about a young Indian-American doctor who recently arrived in this country, and after doing some scut work in a hospital in the Northeast, comes to Johnson City, Tennessee to accept a position at East Tennessee Medical School and the VA hospital there when the AIDS crisis is starting. And one of the paradigms Abraham creates and understands is when a lot of gay men got sick with AIDS, they came home to mama. One definition of family is the people who have to take care of you when no one else will. Although he didn't sign up for it, Verghese became the AIDS doctor in this local community. And this is a wonderful story. We've assigned it in medical school for a decade. I've probably sold Verghese 1 million copies myself. And there are some students who actually went into infectious diseases that I taught because of this book. The title has a triple meaning. One is My Own Country. Verghese was raised as a Christian in India, really felt that he didn't fit anywhere. He finally feels needed and meaning and being the AIDS doctor in Johnson City. He also loves the surrounding country and its beauty. He appreciates it in a way that local people don't. He also comes to really accept America and its promise. All these are in the title, My Own Country. It's a wonderful story about the prejudice that people felt against men dying of AIDS, the struggle before there really was any kind of effective treatments for antiretrovirals. A great book filled with a lot of stories about his patients, most of whom died. So that's the book, My Own Country. My second book might be a surprise to you. It's actually by a bioethicist. It's called In Pain by Travis Reeder. And it is the story, published in 2019, of Travis had a terrible motorcycle accident where his feet were badly damaged. He was put on opioids, things like OxyContin, appropriately for to manage his intense pain. His story is how difficult it was to get off the opioids. And it wasn't mostly his fault. Doctors and dentists are trained to put you on. They're not trained to help you get off. The system is not trained to help people get off opioids. And many of the traditional models like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous don't work. Cold turkey doesn't work. It's really a kind of an indictment of the medical system. The terrible agony that Travis and his wife went through trying to get off opioids. So that's a great book. Travis tells it really well. My third book is called As I Live and Breathe by Jamie Weissman. This is a picture of Jamie on the cover. When Jamie was a teenager, she was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, and this made her susceptible to opportunistic infections. Her father was a doctor, always saw her as very fragile, but she decided to go to medical school anyway. I think she was like an English history major, and she suddenly got some pre-med courses. The beauty of this book is that it switches perspective between her as a patient in the infusion room and the next chapter, her as a doctor, sometimes treating people who are self-destructive, sometimes treating people with the same conditions as her, sometimes even the same patients she's seen in the clinic. And it makes a difference that she's a woman. It makes a difference that with all these conditions and trying to be a doctor, she tries to get pregnant, that she's the daughter of a physician. It's a great read. Students like the book a lot. My next book, number 4, is really pretty famous. When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Calanthe. This is the story published in 2014 of a neurosurgeon resident who has gone through 4 years of pre-med. He's gone through 4 years of medical school. He took 2 years off to go to Oxford to study philosophy and economics. Now he's come back. He's done a year or two regular internships, 3 years of surgical residency, and he's a fellow. And one day he reads his own chest x-ray and he realizes he has terminal lung cancer. Never smoked. This happens to some people. It's a story of how he tries to repair his marriage, possibly have a child to carry on, still try to find meaning in life. Some people claim it's a better book to listen to. Most people at the end are brought to tears. A really great book. My next book, number 5, is called The Citadel by A.J. Cronin, a doctor. And as he said later, this book is semi-autographical. It's about an idealistic Scottish doctor whose first assignment in the British medical system was to Wales, a poor mining town. And a lot of the dilemmas that Cronin faced then in fighting with bureaucracies about payment and the lure of a carriage trade of a very high-paying specialty versus being a primary care doctor for people who love and care for you still resonates today. The book is very well written. The characters are memorable. Freddie Hampton is sort of the devilish specialist who kind of fleeces rich people. There's the Silver King, who is a super rich doctor. You can really see the hierarchy that's in medicine then. They wrote this book in 1937, still exists today. This book was so famous that it's credited for helping to reform the National Health Service in Britain, and it's also been made into a great movie. And Cronin went on to publish a lot of other novels. He's a great writer. My next book, number 6, is Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. We've heard about before. He's a surgeon at Brigham and Harvard Medical School, but he's also an essayist for New Yorker. And this book is mainly dealing with his father and his father's declining age, saw their needs, his father's, in some ways, denial that he's going down. Gawande talks about the family struggle to find a suitable kind of home health care and a suitable kind of nursing home. And finally, Gawande reveals something that I think everybody faces when, although they know abstractly that their parent will die, they never quite accept that he's dying now. This is something in my own life I found difficult to accept when my parents died, and Gawande is very forthright about how he's having trouble dealing with this when his father has died. It's a great read, and a lot of students really like it. My 7th recommendation is called Not an Entirely Benign Procedure by Perry Klass, about her years at Harvard Medical School. She's now a fairly famous pediatrician who's written a bunch of more books. The title refers to what her resident told her to say to a patient when she was going to do her first spinal tap, which, if it goes wrong, can leave a patient paralyzed. When Perry was worried that the patient might say, well, is this a dangerous procedure? The resident told her to say, well, it's not an entirely benign procedure. The class is very good about exposing some of the acronyms in language, hidden language in medicine, such as LOL and NAD, which is little old lady in no apparent distress. It's also important in this book, like the Jimmy Weissman book, that she's a woman and she experienced medical school at Harvard Medical School in a different way, I think, than men. And she writes well about this. My next book is by Lena Wynn, who some of you may have seen on TV. It's called Lifelines. And it's the kind of remarkable story of a woman whose ancestors came from China and who was living in semi-poverty in Southern California. And by some remarkable strokes of luck, had a mentor that encouraged her to take some pre-med courses and apply to medical school. And really a kind of rags to riches story. Lena also is interesting in that she became a Rhodes Scholar. She failed her first try. She didn't really know that the dinner the night before was part of the interview. She came back a second year and won. She has an interesting kind of zigzag journey. She's not the typical clinical doctor. She took a year off to be president of the American Student Medical Association. Later, she also became president of Planned Parenthood. most tellingly, she was the public health commissioner in Baltimore during its great opioid epidemic and later during COVID. She's also a well-known essayist and TV commentator. And this is her personal story. And it's another story of a woman in medicine, in this case, a woman who was fairly poor. It's a good read. So my number 9 is a really, really famous book, The House of God, by officially Samuel Shim, an acronym for Stephen Berger, who, the last I checked, was still a psychiatrist at Harvard. And this is a story about the awful harassment of interns at Harvard and just the terrible things that people were put through in order to feel competent, just dying for 10 minutes of sleep. Since then, the system has been changed somewhat after the Libby Zion case. It's still very grueling. And of course, if you're at Harvard, you're supposed to be the top. You're never supposed to make a mistake. When somebody does make a mistake in the book, somebody doesn't give a person steroids appropriately quickly enough, and the patient dies of jaundice. And every day the residents are passing him. They call him the yellow man, and they're reminded of the tragedy and the cost of making a mistake. The book is sexist in some ways. It was written, I think, in 1978. But if you can overlook it, it has very dark humor. Almost all medical students read it at some point. Several of my students, when they got admitted to Harvard Medical School, the first thing they wanted to do is go meet Stephen Berger. So a very informative read. My final book is a personal favorite. It is The Naturalist by Alabama native E.O. Wilson, who becomes a Harvard professor. And it's the story of how, as a young teenager, he was obsessed with wildlife. He was often in hip boots in Mobile Bay looking for insects and fish. He is actually credited with the first to identify the invasive fire ant found on a beach on the Gulf Coast. He later goes on to a distinguished career, becomes the world's authority on ants. He becomes controversial when he generalizes from the behavior of ants to the behavior of groups of animals to the behavior of groups of humans, which he called social biology. The reaction and the shaming and the prejudice against Wilson, especially at Harvard, by the Nobel Prize winner James Watson and by the leftist biologist Richard Watson, is really kind of shameful. At one point, when Wilson was trying to give a presentation at a scientific conference, some of his colleagues had ice water poured on him from behind, kind of the way winning coaches have at the end of football games, just to shut him up and try to cancel him. It's a really very sad tale. Wilson, I met him several times. He came to Birmingham. I also, by the way, brought Bergies to Birmingham several times. Wilson was a dignified, grand old man of biology the whole time. He later became famous for also trying to save wildlife habitats and the earth. He wrote a bunch of other books. But this is his personal story, and it is very well written. He's a great writer. I couldn't put it down. So those are my 10 recommendations. There are some other books that almost made the list. One of them is called Becoming Dr. Q, a story of Alfredo Conotas Rosa, who went from coming in as a legal teenager to a neurosurgeon. Quite a story. Another one that almost made the list is by Michelle Harper, called The Beauty in Breaking. She is a Black ER doctor who not only experiences some of the prejudice against women, but also prejudice against Black people, Black patients in medicine. It's an interesting read too. That's it for today. If you like this, give me a thumbs up, share. See you next Tuesday.